Queen Elizabeth I was the most powerful woman in Europe. She defeated the Spanish Armada, ruled for 45 years, and was considered unusually hygienic for her time. She bathed roughly once a month and washed her face and hands daily with Spanish soap and rose water. Most people considered her obsessively clean, yet her teeth were black and rotting from sugar addiction. Her face was painted with deadly lead, and she was still the cleanest person most of her subjects would ever meet. Welcome to Tudor England, where water was death, dirt was medicine, and your underwear was washed in someone else's urine. Here's the thing about Tudor England. They weren't stupid, they had a system, and it had a logic. The problem was that the logic was wrong. They believed disease spread through bad air, miasma, but they also believed something worse, that water opened the pores, and open pores let disease into the body. A bath didn't clean you. A bath made you vulnerable. After the Black Death, public bathhouses across Europe were shut down, not because of the plague directly, but because people noticed that bathhouses were where disease spread fastest. They were right about the correlation. They were wrong about the cause. The result? Water became the enemy. Dirt became a shield. The grime on your skin wasn't filth, it was armor. And the dirtier you were, the safer they thought you were. Henry VIII was the exception. He had personal bathrooms installed at Hampton Court, Windsor, and Whitehall with hot and cold water. He bathed often, changed his undershirts daily, and was considered a neat freak by Tudor standards. Most ordinary people took full immersion baths only a few times a year, but they washed daily with cloths and changed linen constantly. And newborn babies weren't bathed at all. They were rubbed with oil and wrapped in cloth. Some parents feared even baptismal water might make their child sick. Here's the detail that captures the whole era. They believed the dirt covering you was actually protecting you, and in a world where contaminated water really could kill you, they weren't entirely wrong. So if you couldn't wash, how did you stay clean? The answer was linen. Tudor England invented a kind of dry cleaning. You wore a linen undergarment, a shift or a shirt, directly against your skin. The linen absorbed sweat, oil, and dirt. When it was soiled, you changed it. Fresh linen, clean body, that was the theory. For the wealthy, this meant changing your linen 2 or 3 times a day. The visible white collar and cuffs peeking from beneath your doublet weren't just fashion. They were proof. Proof that you could afford fresh linen. Proof that you were clean. The more white linen you showed, the higher your status. Elizabeth I owned over 2,000 garments. Her wardrobe was a political statement and a hygiene statement. Every visible inch of white linen said, "I am clean, I am wealthy, I am queen." For the poor, it was one shirt worn for weeks. And here's the unexpected detail. When linen was finally washed, the most common cleaning agent was urine. Human urine. Collected in barrels, it contained ammonia, which broke down grease and dirt. Laundresses, always women, handled the washing. Your underwear cleaned in someone else's waste. And it worked. Sugar arrived in Tudor England as a luxury. Only the wealthy could afford it, and they consumed it obsessively. Poems, marzipan, candied fruits, sugar sculptures at banquets. The result was predictable. Their teeth rotted, turned black, fell out. But here's the interesting thing. Because sugar was expensive, black teeth became a status symbol. If your teeth were rotting, it meant you could afford to rot them. The poor, whose teeth were actually healthier, began staining their teeth black to look wealthy. They painted decay onto healthy teeth to fake prosperity. Elizabeth was the most famous example. Addicted to sugar, her teeth were black stumps by her later years. She pressed her lips together to avoid smiling. Foreign ambassadors reported that her speech was increasingly hard to understand. The richest woman in England could barely eat solid food by the end of her life. Dental care? A cloth wrapped around your finger dipped in salt or crushed charcoal. For breath, you chewed cloves or cinnamon, if you could afford them.
A Tudor breath freshener, if you could afford them.
If a tooth needed pulling, you visited the barber, the same man who cut your hair and performed minor surgery. He did it in the street in public without anesthesia. The Tudor beauty ideal was simple. Pale white skin. Pale meant you didn't work outdoors. Pale meant wealth. And the way to achieve it was Ceruse, a paste of white lead mixed with vinegar applied to the face, neck, and chest. The most popular brand was Venetian Ceruse. It worked beautifully for a while. Then the lead began to eat your skin. The skin cracked, scarred, aged. So you applied more Ceruse to cover the damage, which caused more damage, which required more Ceruse. A cycle of destruction painted onto your own face. Elizabeth used Ceruse for decades. By her later years, her face was reportedly covered in sores and scars, all hidden beneath another layer of white lead. The smallpox she survived in 1562 had left its marks. The Ceruse covered them and slowly made everything worse. For color, they used vermilion on the cheeks, made from mercury, also poisonous. The symptoms of chronic lead and mercury exposure include hair loss, tooth decay, tremors, and mental deterioration. Some historians believe Elizabeth's eccentricities in her final years were not age. They were slow poisoning from decades of cosmetics. Here's the dark irony. They avoided water because they feared it would make them sick. Then they painted their faces with lead and mercury. And it actually did. Tudor London had no sewage system. The streets were the sewer. Every morning, the contents of chamber pots were hurled from upper-story windows into the street below. In Edinburgh, the warning cry was "Gardez-l'eau," from the French "Gardez-l'eau." In London, it was more like "Where below?" Same deadly rain of filth, different shout. The Thames was an open cesspool. The same river that supplied drinking water received the city's waste. At low tide, the riverbed was a horror. Raw sewage, animal carcasses, refuse. Crossing London Bridge meant holding your breath. Rain was a blessing. It washed the streets clean. And a curse because it turned everything to a river of mud. Rakers were employed to clear the worst of it. They fought a losing battle. Here's the unexpected detail. The men who cleaned London's cesspits, the deep holes beneath privies, were called Gong farmers. They worked exclusively at night because the smell was too offensive even for Tudor noses. They descended into the pits with buckets and shovels, and they sold what they collected as fertilizer. The worst job in London, one of the best paid. Someone had to dig through a city's collective waste. They got paid well for it. Plague returned to England like a season, but the Tudors had something even more terrifying: the sweating sickness. It struck 5 times: 1485, 1508, 1517, 1528, and 1551. It killed fast. You could be healthy at breakfast and dead by supper. Drenching sweat, chest pain, a sense of dread. Then death, often within hours. Anne Boleyn caught it in 1528. She survived, most didn't. The strangest thing about the sweating sickness, after 1551, it simply vanished. No one knows why. No one knows what it was. Modern theories suggest hantavirus or a form of influenza, but the truth is we still don't know. A disease that killed thousands just disappeared. Meanwhile, plague doctors wore herb-stuffed masks and carried posies of dried flowers, lavender, camphor, rose petals, believing that good smells would filter the bad air. It did nothing. The famous long-beaked plague doctor costume actually came later in the 17th century. But the idea was the same: sweet smells against death. And the authorities ordered all cats and dogs killed, believing they spread plague. The cats had been keeping the rats in check. Killing them made the plague worse. The difference between a Tudor nobleman and a Tudor laborer wasn't cleanliness. Both were dirty. The difference was how you managed the smell. The wealthy carried pomanders, perforated metal balls filled with perfume and spices hung from the belt or worn at the neck. Walk through a crowded London street holding a pomander to your nose, and the world became almost bearable. Elizabeth's favorite was scented gloves. The perfume industry exploded in Tudor England, not because people wanted to smell good, but because they needed to mask what they smelled like. Everyone had lice. Everyone had fleas, kings included. Henry VIII had a groom of the stool, a courtier whose job included attending the king on the toilet. It was considered one of the most prestigious positions at court. Proximity to the king's body, even at its most private, meant power. The poor lived with the same parasites, but without the pomander. Same lice, same fleas, no perfume. The gap between rich and poor wasn't hygiene. It was fragrance. Average life expectancy in Tudor England, somewhere between 35 and 40 years. Half of all children died before the age of 5. Not from dirt alone, from disease, malnutrition, and a medical system that had no concept of germs. Germ theory wasn't accepted until the 1860s, 3 centuries too late for the Tudors. You can still see how they lived. Hampton Court Palace has preserved Tudor-era communal toilets. The Great House of Easement, designed for 28 courtiers at once. The Museum of London holds Tudor hygiene objects, combs, pomanders, chamber pots. And the Thames. It's clean now. Fish have returned. It took 4 centuries. The Tudors weren't dirty because they were ignorant. They were dirty because they had built a logical system on a false premise. That water was dangerous and dirt was safe. In a world without germ theory, without antibiotics, without clean water infrastructure, their logic made a kind of terrible sense. They were wrong, but they weren't stupid. If you want to see the city where all this happened, watch my Tudor London video next. And if you learned something disgusting today, subscribe for more. Thank you for holding your nose with me.